April 1941. Yugoslavia collapses in fire and confusion. German aircraft bomb Belgrade on the 6th of April, and within days, Axis troops pour in from all sides. The Yugoslav army, unprepared and divided by ethnic rivalries, disintegrates in less than 2 weeks. The kingdom is carved apart. Croatia becomes a fascist puppet state ruled by the murderous Ustasha. Serbia falls under direct German occupation, and the rest is divided between Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria. The occupation unleashes a wave of terror marked by executions, deportations, and revenge killings that turn the Balkans into a landscape of fear. From this chaos, resistance movements begin to rise, some fighting for liberation, others for power. Among them emerges a royalist officer who dreams not of rebuilding Yugoslavia, but of creating a Greater Serbia, cleansed of its non-Serb population. He gathers men in the mountains, calls them Chetniks, and vows to restore order through fire and blood. His struggle becomes one of both resistance and retribution, a campaign against occupiers and civilians alike. His name is Draža Mihailović. Dragoljub Draža Mihailović, one of 3 children of a clerk, was born on the 27th of April, 1893 in the town of Ivanjica, in the southwestern part of the Kingdom of Serbia. Mihailović's parents, Mihailo and Smiljana Mihailović, died relatively early, and young Dragoljub decided to enter the Serbian army. In 1910, he enrolled at the military academy in Belgrade. As a young cadet, he went to fight in the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, and stayed in the army after the Serbian victories, first against the Ottoman Empire and later against the Kingdom of Bulgaria. When the First World War broke out in the summer of 1914, he served on various fronts and took part also in the famous Serbian retreat through the mountains of Albania, known as the Albanian Golgotha because of the harsh conditions. After the First World War, from which Serbia, despite heavy losses, emerged victorious, and with the creation of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, later known as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, Mihailović held various staff posts in the army. In 1920 he married a young widow, Jelica Lazarević, and together they had 4 children. Mihailović was very active during the interwar period and served in various positions, including the Yugoslavian General Staff. He also studied abroad, most notably at the École Spéciale Militaire du Saint-Cyr in France, where he allegedly befriended Charles de Gaulle, the future leader of the Free French forces during the Second World War. At the end of the 1930s, as the situation in Europe worsened, Mihailović served as military attaché in the Kingdom of Bulgaria, stationed in Sofia, and later was sent to Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, where he stayed until May 1937. After returning to Yugoslavia, he presented to his superiors a plan for the reorganization of the Yugoslav army. It is interesting that already in 1939, his thoughts turned from traditional infantry tactics to guerrilla warfare. He wrote to his superior, the Minister of the Army, Milan Nedić, a proposal to reshape the Yugoslavian army. Among his key suggestions were abandoning the defense of the northern frontier to concentrate forces in the mountainous interior, reorganizing the armed forces into national Serb, Croat, and Slovene units to counter subversive activities, and using mobile units along the borders. The reaction of his superiors was negative. The reason was, among others, strong criticism of Yugoslav army in the Mihailović proposal. As punishment for his courage to speak, he was confined to barracks for 30 days and transferred from an active unit to a teaching position in Belgrade. This was not the last time he faced disciplinary punishment. In 1940, A few months after the outbreak of the Second World War, on the 1st of September 1939, he was punished again, this time for his anti-Nazi remarks. His stance was so openly anti-German that the German ambassador in Yugoslavia sent a protest note about him to the still neutral Yugoslav Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As he was a vocal anti-Nazi figure, British intelligence officers sought him out in Belgrade in 1940 and questioned him about his thoughts about the army's attitude in case of a coup against the pro-Axis regency of Prince Paul Karađorđević. Soon, the questions of British intelligence officers transferred to reality of the coup. But despite his anti-Nazi stance, Mihailović did not take part in the coup of the 27th of March 1941, when young King Peter II Karađorđević ended the regency of his pro-German uncle and assumed full powers as a Yugoslavian king. This action enraged Nazi Germany, which decided to punish Yugoslavia for their defiance. After the successful pro-Allied coup, Adolf Hitler immediately ordered the attack against Yugoslavia. On the 6th of April 1941, German aircraft bombed Belgrade, Yugoslavian capital, in a massive air raid that killed thousands of civilians and destroyed large parts of the city. Within days, German, Italian, Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops advanced from all sides. The Yugoslav army, poorly prepared and ethnically divided, could not resist the large-scaled and coordinated assault, as Mihailović predicted in his proposals in 1939. After only 11 days of fighting, the government signed an unconditional capitulation on the 17th of April 1941. The state of Yugoslavia ceased to exist, and its territory was divided among the Axis powers and their allies. To administer the German-occupied zone of Serbia, the Nazi Germany soon installed a puppet government of national salvation headed by former Minister of the Army Milan Nedić. His collaborationist regime maintained limited autonomy under strict German supervision. It controlled part of central Serbia, including Belgrade, and relied heavily on German support. Nedić justified his cooperation as an attempt to preserve order and protect the Serbian population from reprisals. But in practice, his administration enforced German occupation policies, including anti-Jewish decrees, forced labor, and the suppression of resistance movements. When the German invasion of Yugoslavia began, Mihailović was with his unit in eastern Bosnia. After the capitulation of Yugoslavia, he refused to lay down arms. With a small group made up mostly of Serbs, he moved from Bosnia towards central Serbia. On the 6th of May 1941, near the city of Užice in western Serbia, his column ran into a German unit and was almost destroyed. On the 13th of May 1941, after weeks on the move, Mihailović and his men consisting of only 7 officers and 27 soldiers reached the mountain Ravna Gora in central Serbia and established their headquarters there. Mihailović was a Serbian nationalist, envisioning a future Yugoslavia led by the monarchy and dominated by Serbia. He imagined a restored kingdom, or, if idea of united Yugoslavia failed, a Greater Serbia that would include territories taken from the Serbian neighbors. But to create Greater Serbia, it was necessary to fight first against occupiers, and the German reprisals for any attack were ruthless. Adolf Hitler ordered that for every German soldier killed, 100 Serbian hostages must die, and for every wounded, 50. During the war, there were several occasions when Germans almost caught Mihailović and his camps in the mountains. For example, on the 7th of December 1941, during the attack against Mihailović's headquarters, Mihailović barely escaped, and Germans took hundreds of partisans as prisoners. Ironically, on the same day, the exiled King Peter II Karađorđević in London promoted him to a leader of the Yugoslav Home Army. The same month, he was promoted to the rank of General of the Army. It was not the last title Mihailović received during the war. In July 1942, the Germans labeled Mihailović as the most dangerous enemy in the region and placed a bounty of 100,000 Reichsmarks on him. The reaction of the Chetniks was that during the summer and autumn of 1942, their troops carried out acts of sabotage against railway lines, bridges, and trains in Serbia, which were important German supply route that ran through Yugoslavia and Italy to their forces fighting in North Africa. Nazi Germany decided to react with brutal response, and Chetniks were forced to retreat from their positions, and civilians were murdered by Germans for their support of the anti-Nazi movement. But Chetniks fought against civilian population too. They expelled Muslims and Croats from areas they controlled, and engaged in mass killings of non-Serbian citizens. In the town of Pljevlja, the Chetniks massacred 13 babies in cradles. Then, they threw older children, women, and old people into houses, filled the buildings with straw or hay, and then set them on fire. They also tied women to oak trees, placing straw beneath them, creating a makeshift pyre, and then burned them while singing. In the municipality of Broz, the Chetniks killed every child taller than 128 centimeters, the length of the Italian short rifle. In Prehari village, 52 children were thrown into a pit, and over 20 women were raped. In the village of Dolovi, 42 women and children were gathered in a house which was then set on fire. It is established that around 70,000 people from Croatia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina were murdered by Chetniks, as they were fighting not only against occupiers, but they were ethnically cleansing the territory for future Greater Serbia. Draža Mihailović, the leader of the Chetniks, was in his position responsible for these atrocities. Croats and Bosnians living in areas intended to be part of Greater Serbia were to be cleansed of non-Serbs in accordance with Mihailović's orders. Because of his brutal actions against non-Serbian population and strong German countermeasures, Mihailović was slowly losing support. When on the 7th of November 1942, Mihailović called on the Serbian people to engage in civil disobedience against the occupiers, only few responded. One of the reasons of lost support of Mihailović and his units was that Mihailović's forces were fighting not only the occupiers, but also other Yugoslav partisan movements. The Balkans had descended during the Second World War into civil war, with alliances shifting constantly. After an initial period of cooperation with Josip Broz Tito's communist partisans, who sought to establish a socialist Yugoslavia, relations broke down in 1942 and soon turned into open conflict. Mihailović, with support from the collaborationist Nedić government, attempted to legalize Chetnik formations, receiving money, food, and uniforms also from the Axis powers. At the same time, he tried to convince the British government that he was the only true resistance leader in Serbia. Fearing communist influence, he saw limited cooperation with the occupiers as a lesser evil. The Chetniks, in their view, defended the monarchy and pre-war order, while the Tito's partisans fought for a socialist revolution. Tito's partisans were more effective militarily and politically, establishing people's liberation councils in liberated areas, and at the end, they succeeded in gaining the support from the Allies. By the mid of the 1943, British policy shifted decisively toward them, and Mihailović was abandoned by the Allies due to lack of significant anti-Axis action, his focus on internal conflicts and evidence of collaboration with the Axis against the Tito's partisans. By early 1945, Mihailović's position was desperate. In April, Generaloberst Alexander Löhr, the same man who ordered the bombing of Belgrade in 1941, offered to escort Mihailović toward Austria to surrender to the British, but he refused. With about 12,000 men, he tried to march back to challenge the new communist regime before they can firmly establish their rule in Yugoslavia. This last and desperate attempt failed, and on the 12th of May 1945, Mihailovic's forces were surrounded near Kalinovic, a town in the southeastern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and around 9,000 Chetniks were killed and Mihailović barely escaped. At last, he was captured on the Serbo-Bosnian border on the 13th of March 1946, after being allegedly betrayed by one of his commanders. Mihailović was arrested and his trial opened on the 10th of June 1946 in Belgrade. He was charged with war crimes and collaboration with the enemy. On the 15th of July 1946, the military court sentenced him to death. His appeal for clemency was rejected the next day, and on the 17th of July 1946, he was executed by firing squad in Belgrade. He was 53 years old.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.